an industry the size of what storage was going to be is not able to be supported from just one corner of the world. So we started down that road. And just in the last couple of months, we shipped the first domestic content qualifying units.
Yeah.
So when I first built a storage system in 2008, it was a domestic system. We made modules in the US, we made enclosures in the US, we shipped everything in the US and put that first lithium battery on the grid in 2008. And then as this ramped up, things went overseas for scale. And so now what we're seeing is the ability to bring some of that scale back to the United States, take the lessons that have been developed at scale in other countries, embed those into the factories here and begin to scale up here. Not to say we can't import anything, but we should have a little bit more balance to what we're doing. And so we're shipping those systems now with cells made in the United States, enclosures made in the United States. We have partnerships to do the thermal management system in the United States, inverter in the United States. We can go up to 100% of the content made in the United States. And that's real now.
Storage is no longer a sidekick to renewables. And that's something that it's a theme we've been exploring a lot this week, John. It's the new normal, if you will, on the grid. And for the first time, US-made batteries are finally shipping into projects here at home.
Right.
Something that was a figment of our imagination only a couple of years ago, really.
Just one short year ago, we were predicting it as a future event.
That's correct. Right? That's right from this very stage.
Yeah, that's right.
The question now is, how do we deliver them faster, safer, and with supply chains that that developers can actually trust?
Right.
So as I mentioned, John is the president of Fluence. He's been at the forefront of building this industry from its very earliest days. He brings a perspective that few others can match, in my opinion. Policy, supply chain, project execution. John's been in the middle of all of it, and he really understands the future of how storage integrates with our power system. John, this year's been called a bit of a reset for renewables writ large. How do you see the current landscape for storage, and why has that outlook only strengthened?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking as I was on the way over here, trying to figure out, well, what year is this? This is year 18 in storage for me. So, we'll have to do something for the 2 decades coming up here.
Yeah, we'll celebrate it in 27.
So this has been, it's been a year of change and volatility, I think, for renewables and policy and energy generally. I think storage has existed mainly as just a better mousetrap, a better way to serve reliable power, low-cost power, and reduce emissions. And it has existed in a large extent mainly as just an economically driven growth opportunity, and it hasn't really had a large amount of policy around it. So what we saw is just a few years ago, people began to wake up to the fact that policy could actually help accelerate this, and so we started to get grouped into a lot of the same policies that were driving renewable growth.
Right.
And then this year, obviously, all of that went up in the air with both trade impacts with things coming in, and then as well the whole discussion about what to do with the ITC and where future tax credits and stuff were going. So we spent a big chunk of the year really deep education with policymakers and others to say, where does storage fit in this world, and how does it fit? And I think a lot of folks were surprised to understand that storage has been doing things, with all kinds of resources on the grid. So we've combined it with gas plants, we've combined it with coal plants, we've combined it with hydro, wind, solar. We've been building projects on the transmission grid. I think we're starting to see some things that are going into the distribution grid. So it's a technology that makes the power system better and cheaper. And I think that message came through in the policy environment. And we saw storage basically do, reasonably well in an environment where, there were a lot of wolves coming after pieces of the industry. I think storage really shone in that and has come out of it fairly strong.
What do you feel as an industry, and I'm going to say as a vertical, storage is its own industry. It has its own center of gravity now. What do you think that you all did right in Capitol Hill? Because I talked to battery storage executives, and they weren't particularly surprised that battery storage was essentially left alone, not FIAC notwithstanding.
Right.
And yet many solar executives, it seemed like they felt like the rug was pulled. What do you feel like is the key differentiator there?
Well, I do think one, storage is newer. It's a newer industry. And I think it doesn't have the same history of so many years of policy support. And we've had this cycle in the industry of ITC, PTC, is it going to be renewed? Is it not going to be renewed?
Yeah.
That's kind of driven the industry for a long time. Storage really hasn't had any of that. So I don't think it's been as adapted to the policy environment. So that was helpful, particularly in the current climate, was a feeling that this isn't really just a policy driven thing. It's actually an economically driven thing. And I think the second part is it's a supply chain that has parts of it in the US and still seems like an enormous amount of growth to come.
Right.
And so there's a real sense that there's an industry that we want to participate in from a U.S. policy standpoint and creating jobs in the United States that people could see. And I think just the bits that we've already done over the last few years are creating thousands of jobs in the U.S. with real manufacturing and more to come into the future.
Yeah.
So those two things resonated. And then I think just anybody looking at the grid and saying, what are we really trying to do? If we want power prices to be lower and we want the lights to stay on, storage is one of the single best investments that you can do in that. There's lots of other things that have to happen. We might have new fossil plants. We might have new distribution. We might have more transmission. We might have more renewables. But storage helps glue all those things together in a way that's very unique. And I think that message came through, and the policymakers really responded to it.
I think one of the things that you point out as well is something that, as I reflected, something that was definitely brought up in the justification for why storage kept the IRA incentives, and it was the notion that solar, with 30 years of incentive and policy support, had matured and batteries had not. I think it's a really key distinction. You just mentioned, and so we'll talk about the specifically shipping of domestic content. You've announced, I think it was this week or very recently.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, that you are shipping now.
That's right.
Officially shipping from your factory.
That's right.
What are developers saying about the reality of this? And I'm thinking of, like, what does it really mean for developers to be able to actually have domestic content for utility scale? We're not talking, Solar Edge or Enphase.
Sure. Well, I mean, one, I'm just going to stop for a second and celebrate because, we've been working towards this for a number of years. And it seems, it's one of those things that I've seen in storage again and again, which is once you do something, it seems really obvious that everybody should do this and we're all just going to do this. Well, why wouldn't we make this in the United States? But going back a few years ago, when really nothing was being made in the United States, it didn't seem that obvious. Yeah. And I think we started to see, coming out of COVID, massive disruptions of getting things shipped and getting them to our customers, where the difficulty is, the most important thing once the project's going is that it gets done on time.
Right.
And these logistics log jams concentrated in one part of the world just didn't work for our industry. Yeah. The United States is one of the biggest markets in the world for energy storage, and everything was having to come in mostly through the port of LA and Long Beach, and it just was a mess, just a total mess. And then we're getting terrorist activities shooting at transport ships, we're getting weather events, or just all kinds of stuff that became very clear to us, even apart from the IRA and anything else, that an industry that of the size of what storage was going to be is not able to be supported from just one corner of the world. So we started down that road, and just in the last couple of months, we shipped the first domestic content qualifying units. Yeah. So when I first built a storage system in 2008, it was a domestic system. We had batteries that were made in Nevada, of all places, not in a mega pack factory. This was way back to Altair Nano and companies that don't really get much airtime anymore.
Right.
We made modules in the U.S. We made enclosures in the U.S. We shipped everything in the U.S. and put that first lithium battery on the grid in 2008. And then as this ramped up, things went overseas for scale. And so now what we're seeing is the ability to bring some of that scale back to the United States, take the lessons that have been developed at scale in other countries, embed those into the factories here, and begin to scale up here. Not to say we can't import anything, but we should have a little bit more balance to what we're doing. And so we're shipping those systems now with cells made in the United States, enclosures made in the United States. We have partnerships to do the thermal management system in the United States, the inverter in the United States. We can go up to 100% of the content made in the United States. And that's real now.
Yeah, that's actually the question I wanted to ask. So we're seeing blended content as a strategy at utility scale for modules and inverters, racking, et cetera. How much demand is there from the field for 100% domestic battery content?
It's not so much that there's a demand for it. I think it's allowing people to adjust the risk spectrum. So there's two big things that people are weighing. One is, what is this going to cost me? And is that economic to the customers that they're serving, right? So the foreign content still today is cheaper than what we're producing in the United States. That's the reality, in part because those factories have scaled.
With tariffs.
Even with tariffs, but not with the policy. So if you take into the account the investment tax credits and others, the U.S. production makes sense.
Right.
It's cheaper than getting things abroad. The other part that's harder to quantify is all this series of additional risks that are coming with people becoming more and more aware of things like, Unforced Labor Protection Act, right? Where we're seeing, enforcement in different places. We're seeing specific tariff actions around different materials and minerals. All of that climate of uncertainty is here. And I think people that are going, they've spent 5, 7, 10 years in interconnection, developing a project, mobilizing capital, going to do it. And then by the time they sign the deal to when they want to get the project online, these different things are coming up. Those are just risks that are very difficult for a project owner, capital investor, whether you're debt or equity, to kind of take those sort of risks. And so I think people are looking at that spectrum and saying, the more U.S. content I have, the less I have to deal with some of these risks that are hard to cap off. And so I think people are moving along that scale and saying, there's a base level of U.S. content that I want to get to make sure that I get the 10% bonus tax credit.
Right.
The new version of the ITC, once we start to move through safe harbor, to get any of the ITC, the 30% base credit, you're going to need to have domestic content. And then I've got all of these other potential risks that become a bigger deal the less U.S. content I have. And so I think people are resetting on their sense of cost versus risk versus certainty and kind of coming at that. So we're creating a supply chain that allows us to go up to 100% so that we can move it around with different customers to satisfy that balance of cost and risk and certainty. So that's really our goal, is to work with people, and we're happy to do it at whatever level. We have some customers that are doing a little bit of U.S. made content down to 20%. We have other customers that are going up 70 or 80%. And it's really about being able to serve that appetite with certainty.
Yeah. Speaking of appetite, one of the biggest appetites in energy right now that's creating all the load growth that we're experiencing is this surge in AI, data centers, hyperscalers. And I'm curious, you have a perspective. I've heard you refer to batteries as a shock absorber of sorts in this system. How does that actually work, that it's a shock absorber? Specifically, let's speak to the hyperscalers. And does it change the way the grid ultimately sees batteries or operates with batteries as an asset?
Yeah. Well, to a large degree, what storage is doing is it's providing some kind of a buffer between the real-time demand and what's being produced, right? So almost anything, if you think about and this is sort of the thinking that we had back in 2006 and 2007, if you think about almost any kind of thing in our world, if you have to do it in real time, it's very difficult. It tends to be expensive and it tends to be fragile. And we don't do a lot of things in real time, right? So if you're driving your car, there's traffic lights that cue traffic. If you're getting drinking water, there's a reservoir, right? We're not waiting for it to rain into your mouth at the moment that you need it. But in a lot of elements of the electricity system, that's effectively what it is. It's like we're hoping it rains into our mouth at the moment that I need a drink. It's there, right? So storage has provided that non-real-time efficiency that we see in warehouses, in traffic lights, and reservoirs, in any kind of storage. And so it allows you to not have to overbuild capacity to such a large degree so that for that one peak moment, you need so much more generation than you need every other. Like when I started my career, I was working in a restaurant, as many of us have. Yeah. And, peak day for a restaurant is Mother's Day. This is the single busiest day for a restaurant in the world, or any restaurant really in the United States, is Mother's Day. Yeah. You don't keep the amount of team, staff, food every day of the year that you need for Mother's Day, right? But you have to have the ability to scale up. But our electricity grid, because you can't build it, you can't call extra wait staff into the electricity grid. Right. You have to have the power plants. You have to have the distribution lines. We essentially pay for this overbuilt grid so that we can deal with Mother's Day a few times a year, right? And storage is giving us the ability to not have to do that. We can build with storage, create buffers in this grid that lowers the cost. It improves the efficiency because you don't need to be doing everything in real time. So that's really where this starts. And the place we started with storage was no one believed a battery could do a job on the grid. Yeah. I mean, let's go back to the beginning. This is a pipe dream. It'll never happen. Batteries can't survive. They're not rigorous enough. They won't be able to do these jobs. And so a lot of the first period of this was proving the battery could do a job that a power generator did. Yeah. Once we convinced that, then we started to move into some jobs power generators can't do. There's no standby power generator that can absorb power and store it for later. They just don't do it. It's physically impossible. Yeah. And there's no generator that can be generating in one direction, providing power, and then switch in 10 milliseconds, it's absorbing power, and then switch back 10 milliseconds later. So those are jobs that we didn't value because they didn't have a tool. Right now we have this tool. So now the second period has been, let's do something that's a little bit unique. Getting back to your hyperscale question, I think this next phase is going to be, we now have a consumer demand, a business demand from a customer that's got very unique power needs, high amounts of power, lots of fluctuations as AI is learning in very, very short time intervals. Our electric power grid was not built to do that.
Yeah.
It was meant to meet most of this demand. The demand kind of slowly moves up and down. Now you've got loads that are going to be on and off very rapidly at very large scale. And I think storage is going to fit right there.
Yeah.
And it's going to evolve to a more intelligent grid and one that's much more responsive.
Yeah. And I would argue or add the fourth that there's zero tolerance for failure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
In recent years, and let's talk like the last 3 to 4 years, safety is, I'd say, the main concern. Many of us flew here. I have to declare whether or not I have lithium batteries, which of course I don't. You always say no. But safety is a big concern. We don't want the plane catching fire any more than we want these large assets catching fire. You mentioned some of the early plants. I mean, AES, your former, your business sort of Fluence
evolved out of, yeah,
of course. And your former employer has had is as one of the legacy installers has had to deal with this concern of like, how do we mitigate this with our communities? Fluence and AES as a partner has been very proactive to take what many consider to be drastic measures in fire testing and fire safety. I'm curious, as the leader who was there sort of approving and setting this up, do you feel validated by the decisions that you've made now? And how do you think it's shaped the industry's approach? And then
that's a great question. I mean, I don't think there's any company out there that would tell you they're not concerned about safety.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's also like, are you concerned about it and you think you have it handled, or are you concerned about it and you're continuously pressing forward? I think that's the difference. And I would say when we started in this, we were concerned about safety. We took a lot of steps. We thought we were being very diligent, and we went about a decade with no incidents at all.
Yeah.
Then we had an incident, and what you find in the middle of an accident is things are not quite so predictable as you think they're going to be when you do your risk analysis. And you have human actors that do things that you just didn't expect because they're dealing with a crisis in the moment.
Right.
And the documentation you carefully set aside isn't where people thought it was, and the people that you trained aren't the ones that actually respond to it. So there's a lot of things that happen, and we just really recreated our view on safety out of that event. We worked really closely with Arizona Public Service. And I would say that was in my career really a seminal event. The 2019 fire that we had, it is a turning point in how we thought about this industry, because up until that point we had thought, if we do everything we need to do in design and management, we will avoid any of these types of things and it'll be fine. At that point, we started to realize our thinking on this is flawed. We're not going to avoid this. If we get to the scale of energy storage that we really think the industry needs, you're going to have millions and millions and millions of battery cells in all kinds of environments, for years. The fact is that in that just rough numbers game, something's going to happen. You're going to get a manufacturing quality defect. Somebody's going to, go do maintenance and do something slightly wrong, drop a bolt or a metal tool across two terminals and short something. You're going to have an event of some sort. So we went from thinking, how do we prevent everything and stop it, to thinking there's going to be an event at some point.
Right.
How do we make sure it doesn't hurt humans, and how do we keep it small? So that was a change in design thinking, and that led to our Gen 6 product that we rolled out. We've sold more than 40,000 units deployed around the world. It's been kind of the leader, installed deflagration testing. That philosophy and safety has kept us, has been with us all through where we're going now. And at one point we realized, hey, the fire testing and modeling isn't good enough. Right. We actually need to take these and actually listening to the battery vendor isn't good enough. Even the testing they're doing, we need to take one of these full-size systems and burn it in its entirety.
Yeah.
Not just what 9540A was telling us to do, but like, let's burn it and actually see what happens.
Yeah.
And so a few years ago, we started doing that. That's an expensive thing. You're burning up, brand new valuable equipment. Nobody was requiring us to do it. I think now the part of validation is we're seeing almost everybody do that. And the reality is you need to see, is it going to propagate left or right, up or down?
Right.
What's actually coming out of it? We know what's supposed to come out of it, what's actually coming out of it. So we have a test facility we've used a lot of times. We can see the actual materials and emissions that are coming out.
Right.
That's allowing us to inform the industry about, hey, do we really need to do evacuations?
Right.
Our answer is no. None of these fires have ever escaped any of the properties or premises that they've been on. None of them have poisoned the communities around. The type of things that comes out of them are not coming out like a toxic cloud. There is some emissions, the stuff we need, but we're not detecting it anywhere, but the immediate adjacent surrounding to these facilities. So this is all about being a responsible citizen, right? And if you have the aspirations of making this industry get as big as we are, any of these kind of fire events or safety events, any, concerns people have, they just slow you down, right? So you gotta get ahead of it and really understand what's going to happen and be able to provide that information so everyone can see. It's not just that we think we're doing the right thing, but everyone can see this is the right approach to this. Yeah. And anytime there's an event, whether it's ours or somebody else's, we need to get all the lessons out of that. That's how a young industry becomes, embedded in the world in the way we do things. And I think that's the path we're on with storage.
Yeah. Well, the other way that you get embedded in the world is by convincing developers to say, I pick you. And if I'm a developer right now in this audience planning a 25-year storage product, there's kind of two things in my mind. What are the biggest pitfalls? Maybe I'm an early in the stage of learning development for batteries. What are the biggest pitfalls you've seen? You've seen hundreds, if not thousands of projects. And then what should a developer be looking for in a partner to safeguard that long-term success?
Well, I mean, I always tell to people, find somebody that has some scars.
Yeah.
Because
scar tissue is good.
Exactly. You don't want to be their first scar, and I think there's a lot of cases where you don't want to be learning in a bad event while they're learning in a bad event. So finding a vendor that's seen some things, they've done some things in different environments. The technology's changing on a relatively rapid basis. Just thinking about large capital investments, they don't usually go through these 2 or 3 massive product, 2 or 3 year massive product cycles, right? Large capital equipment, you think it's on a 5 or a 10 or longer year cycle. Right. This industry is moving very, very quickly. So you want somebody that can stay at the front edge of that in a reasonable way, but who isn't sort of at the bleeding edge of it. So those are a couple things. And I think practically speaking, a track record of getting projects done. I always tell people, what goes wrong on a project? Interconnection's always late. So what's our plan for that? We've done a lot of stuff where we energize without permanent power. Communications is always a problem. How are we going to deal with that? Operational people need to be drawn in earlier. If you're waiting till the system's done before they come in, you're going to go through a cycle of seeing the performance drop off. So how do we do that with things? And a lot of that comes down to mobilizing people to really aim at, an on-time, high-performing system again and again and again. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of continuous improvement, like a lot of cycles of learning. Everything that went wrong on this, we try to take back into the front end. People talk about that quality cycle. It's taken us a little while to get good at it. I mean, we've taken a lot of our own hits but we've always been trying to learn with the industry or learn ahead of the industry in such a way that we're there for the next thing, to be the, an experienced guide, as you will, as people move through even larger projects and newer areas, doing newer applications.
Before I ask you the last question, I thought it was really fun. An anecdote that you shared with me that I think you were speaking to Speaker House or someone on Capitol Hill about the reality of how storage was not originally created as a renewables coupled product. How was it being used?
Yeah, no, it was funny because coming out of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, people were saying, well, renewables might not be in the spotlight so much, and we know that affects storage. And they're saying, well, and you guys are really focused on having to solve the intermittency of renewables. Right. And I said, well, that's kind of where people focus this now. But for the first 10 years of doing storage, we were focused on the intermittency of thermal plants, right? And so all of where storage came from was coal plants didn't move fast enough. Gas plants weren't turned on. All of these things that we think of as the reliable baseload has all kinds of forms of its own intermittency. And storage mostly in those years was dealing with those things. And we still do that. We put storage alongside gas and coal. And so you can build more gas, we can build more coal, we can build more renewables. Storage is going to be needed there regardless of what we do. And so it's a complement to whatever we build. People tend to frame things in the moment. So in the moment, it's this idea that renewables are intermittent, but really is everything breaks. Everything has down cycles, right? So, storage fills in that gap and really helps make the whole system better.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
As we look out to the next 18 months, what's one system change you expect to be mainstream?
Oh,
this is your Oracle moment again.
One power system. So last year, I think I said we would be shipping real domestic content. So ding, ding, ding. I get that one. Yeah. Okay. So now let's
test
see.
You again next
Let's see.
September
What am I going to
November.
say now? What we're going for? Shoot, Nico.
I should have prepared you for
this.
You
even warned me a little bit, but I forgot to think forward. I think we're going to see even more tension with the Chinese supply chain, to be honest with you. I think as much as we kind of are getting a handle on where it is now, I think it's going to continue to be a very complex topic. So that's one.
So the preparation there is, if you're a developer, really look into the implications of FIAC.
Exactly. And what are you really going to do to supply that? And then I think we are going to see things start to ramp up. We're already seeing U.S. manufacturing at a fledgling level. I think we're going to see even more of that come. So that one, maybe that's not so far out a prediction. And so maybe the third one is, I think the data center stuff is very real in the sense of starting to change the way we build new resources. Not just that it's demand. I think everybody's comfortable with the idea that there's a demand coming from this, but it's going to change actually the way we build new things. Yeah. And so I think we'll start to see that in the next year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
John Zahurancik from Fluence, I am always honored to share the stage with you. I learn every time. Thank you all for joining us for this live interview with John here on the Power Up Live stage in Vegas.
Yeah, thanks so much.